Hello, you're listening to the K-12 Tech Podcast, bringing you insights into the world of education technology. Stay tuned as we discuss the past, the present, and most importantly, the future of technology in our schools.
Hello, and thank you for joining us with our K-12 podcast today. My name is Sean. I am in the Cleveland office for K-12 Tech. We're also joined by Mike Hotzeller, who is in the Michigan office for K-12 Tech. And we're also joined by Eileen Belastock CETL, who is the proprietor of Belastock Consulting. Sorry about that. And Eileen, I just want to introduce you. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would just give us a little bit of background about yourself, how you got to where you are now, where you started from, and kind of your journey in general.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you for having me, Mike and Sean. Just a heads up, I have a wicked strong Boston accent, so that might come through. So if you have any problem with my accent, we can put closed caption on the bottom after a while. So, I started my career as an accounting manager. I did accounting for 15 years. That was my original career path. And then when I stayed home with my kids when they were little, I ended up volunteering in schools and seemed to have worked my way from high school math teacher to high school principal. And then I had some really strong tech directors who really supported me with technology initiatives in my schools in the classroom and as a administrator. And I moved into the CTO role about 6-7 years ago. I recently, what some people would call failed at retiring, and I'm working as my own consulting. I do a lot of writing. I've been writing on EdTech issues for probably about 7 or 8 years, really strong. So people kind of know me from my writing, but now I'm working more with PR companies as a strategic advisor. Because I've done all the roles in education, I really have, I seem to have a lot to offer to software companies as they're trying to, work their way through school districts. And I am most proud of is my CETL, which thank you for saying it correctly, which is my Certified Educational Technology Leader certification. It's through COSIN. It's the only national certification for tech directors, and it's a pretty rigorous program, and it really is it's an honor to be considered one of the probably about 650 of us in the entire world. So it's a small elite group.
So what is, you said it's a very rigorous process. So what kind of do you have to go through to earn that, or how long did it take you to complete that process for the certification?
Well, interestingly, because tech directors are there's only one in each district. So when I made the move from being a building administrator into the CTO role, I was trying to find my people, and I came across COSIN, and through my involvement with COSIN, they had this certification program. And the process is you have to have so many years of experience as a tech director. They really want someone who's done budgeting and leadership and deals with data and community and communications. And so they require you have some experience as an ed tech leader. And then this has changed recently, which has been great, but you have to take a test, an online test. And then when I was taking it, you had to do 5 essays, follow up with 5 essays. COSIN offers a course, which I took, which prepared me for all this. And then you get your certification, which you renew every 3 years, and you have to make sure you have enough of continuing ed. But you really have to know your job in order to do it. But COSIN's really good at supporting. They have an early career CTO academy that actually I'm a thought partner in. And what they do is they take new CTOs like myself. I wish we had it when I was there. And they work with their thought partners, and they go through a whole process through the year, learning about data privacy and E-rate and all those things that we need to get involved with. And then ends up with a capstone. And most of them go on to get their CETL certification. So COSIN's done a really good job of promoting and supporting CTOs, where when I first started, there wasn't a ton of support for us.
So you do a lot of consulting. You mentioned even with the COSIN board. Um, what all do you like typically help with? Do they have like specific topics you come in on, or do you kind of just like help with anything they ask you?
So with COSIN, I'm involved. I'm on their policy committee. I'm also on their CTO council. I'm on they're actually the certification governance committee. So I'm also been working very closely with COSIN on their student home connectivity study. It was a grant by Chan Zuckerberg. It's been a 2-year process just to do some analysis of 12 districts across the country, rural, urban, large, small, and just to see, what are the connectivity issues that our students are dealing with, such as, upload, download speed, bandwidth, the type of device they're using. So I'm right on their advisory team for the last 2 years, and I've also been writing all their briefs on it, their case studies. So that's been really cool. Um, Home connectivity has been a huge issue, and interesting it's not going away even now that we're all back in school. So that's what I've been involved with them. I present and write a lot about cybersecurity and data privacy, so I try to get as much involved with COSIN as I can on those different areas. I remember when we gave out devices, like, this is great, the kids have a device. I had students bringing the devices back to me because I said I don't have any connectivity. So it's that last mile that we struggle with. My recent last job was on Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and you would think that they would have fiber everywhere, and that we had the last mile on Cape Cod because the connectivity wouldn't get out there. So I think that's still an issue. I really do think it's a community issue, not a school issue. And just because kids are back in school doesn't mean they're not going to be, researching and collaborating. We don't want that to stop. And we can't take back hotspots and think everything's okay going forward. So it's an equity problem just across the board for a long time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I live in a very well developed area, and I still have connectivity issues sometimes from here to there. And I mean, the wind could blow and I lose internet.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned a big part of that was cybersecurity. So, like, what part of the security exactly are you really looking at? Is it kids doing things on their computer, or is it people getting into the kids' computers?
So there's two things there. There's internet safety, and then there's cybersecurity. So internet safety is our web filtering, with Google and GoGuardian and securely on those. We actually, make sure that students aren't going to sites that are, pornography or violence and those kind of things. So that's one thing. And many districts now um, have the devices even at home VPN back into the school. So they're actually still, even when they open up their Chromebooks at home, they're still connecting to our school network and still actually they're still filtered. The other piece is cybersecurity. And honestly, I hate to say it, but it's a lot of times it's user error. And I write about this a lot, but a teacher will bring in their laptop from the summer, and there's ransomware on there, and they open it up, connect to the network, and there it is. Phishing emails are huge. They open up a phishing email, and just by opening up the link, they're actually letting get the hackers into the system. So districts are doing a really good job at that, but it's not the students are doing the DDoS, the designated denial of service, which is, I've seen that happen, where they actually flood the system with emails so that the system shuts down at school and they don't have to take their finals or their state testing, or they can have a day off from school. So those kind of things have become more of a student thing. But the outside hackers are coming in through just simple emails or personal devices getting on our network. So those are the two different things.
And we've
So,
even had with K-12, we've even had recently an email came through, and it's from the exact email address that we were talking to the person from the school, but it wasn't that person. They don't know who it was, but it had the exact same address, like everything checked out to the school. And so we were communicating back and forth. And then when we reached out to the school, a couple weeks later, because we hadn't heard anything, they were like, "Yeah, you never talked to us." So that was a very interesting experience. I think they
Yeah.
probably ramped up their security a little bit.
And sometimes, it's no trust zone. You just if something doesn't look right, it probably isn't. And the biggest thing is change passwords. Two-step authentication, change your password every few months. Where teachers sometimes, and I'm not saying just teachers because I've had administrators do the same thing, have a little book or it's stickied, a sticky note underneath their desk or something like that. And I get it. We have so many passwords, but um, it's interesting because cybersecurity insurance companies, the companies that offer cybersecurity insurance, are getting really tight on the two-step authentication because passwords are such an easy thing to break and to access. And we're using the same passwords for everything. So even the insurance companies are pushing back at school districts saying you really need to put more things in place because this is how they're getting in. They're getting in through passwords, they're getting in through emails. And honestly, you don't want teachers having to worry about this. So you put things in place so that it can't happen.
And as when I was teaching, I would bring my personal device in from home as well, not even thinking that that would ever be an issue.
Mm.
Especially since I never noticed anything on my computer, I probably would have never known if I did let something in the network. So from a staff or teacher perspective, or even from a school perspective, what can you do to limit the possibility of bringing something into a school's network unknowingly or on accident?
There's a few things. Not letting non-school issued devices onto your main network. That's the first thing. A lot of in the beginning when one-to-one started, we didn't have enough devices, but we wanted kids to be online. So we would have them kids do BYOD. We're moving away from that BYOD because we can't control what's on what they're bringing in on their computer. So we're trying to not have non-school devices on our network. We're also creating a variety of levels of network access. You would have student access and you would have faculty access and guest access. The only problem with that is many times that teachers will share their teacher access with their students because they want to get on this YouTube video that they need to in order to do their social studies project, and then it just goes through the school. So again, that needs to be changed constantly. But so those are kind of the best practices for that. I've even heard of schools not prior you could actually remote desktop in and print things off the print into the printer at school. Now that is a cybersecurity issue incident waiting to happen. So many schools said, no, you can't remote print. So that means you have to wait till you're in the building on our network and then print to the network printer, which teachers like to have all their material before they come into school. But that was just definitely a gap that we in some of our districts were wanted to shut right down. So
I guess a question with that. So guest networks at schools, a lot of times those are like open, just anyone can connect to it. Sometimes they will have a password that you have to get like from the front desk. But how do you know how does that go off
yeah.
the same internet, or how do they protect that?
So it actually has its own network and it goes right out to the internet. So it doesn't connect to any of our systems. So that it's just a one-way path out. So it doesn't actually connect to our, any other part of our infrastructure. So, and honestly, you really kind of have to have a guest network if you are doing any kind of the schools, you're doing school committee meetings, you're doing presentations, you're doing it that you really want a guest network, but it's a very secure, isolated network that only goes out. So the big thing about cybersecurity is you want to be able to stopgap where things go. So say you have a virus that attacks one part of your system, you need to be able to shut that piece of the system down so it doesn't get into your other systems, like your payroll system or your student information system. And that all ties back to data governance, which is really, really important, is who actually needs to have access to the data. does your administrative assistants need to have access to anything more than just, the basic information for students? Do they need to have access to their personally identifiable information? Who has access to health records? Who has access to the payroll system? Where is your payroll system? Is it in a cloud-based storage system, or do you have it in the server in the back room at central office? So there's a lot of ways that we can stopgap things, as long as you do a good analysis of your system and really figure out who actually has access to that data and why they have access to that data. And I've had principals not happy with me because they're system admins in our student information system. There's no absolute reason why they need it, but there's something about being a system admin that everybody wants that title. So
Or one thing I wanted to kind of say. So again, on the topic of cybersecurity, I know that's been a huge talking point the past. Honestly, I've seen it blow up like the past 6 months, but I know it's been going on for a little while. What would be probably like the number one piece of advice you would give to like a tech director or like a network engineer at a school to maybe like bolster the security relatively quickly or at least easy? Obviously, there's so many things you could do, but probably what would be like the number one thing they should implement right away?
So I think school districts do a really good job of with their firewalls and the infrastructures to keep the bad people out, right? They do a really good job, and you've probably heard it a million times, but it's not if, it's when. So I think what's really important is you have a really good redundancy plan. You have a really good crisis response plan, as to what's going to happen when this happens, who's going to be contacted, who's going to talk to the superintendent, and is superintendent going to be the communications person to talk to the community, to talk to the school boards, or do you have a communication person? When do you call the insurance company? When do you get the lawyers involved? How do you deal with the media? How much manpower are you going to need, and how long, if you're down for a week, what's that going to look like to instruction in classrooms? What's going to look like for your payroll system if that's what got hit? How are you going to do offsite payroll so that can, because payroll is big. Payroll, if you can pay people, that's huge. But it's more having that redundancy plan for your data and having a really good crisis response team. And I think that's where the schools who recover the fastest are have a really good plan, because sometimes until it happens, you don't really know you don't have a list of who needs to be called, and someone forgot to call the superintendent, or so and so's on vacation, so nobody knows it's happened for a week, things like that. So I think it's on the other, once it happens, what is your plan?
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you practice every other drill in school. I mean,
Yeah.
it's
On a side note of this, I've been talking to some districts, and they're looking about not doing cybersecurity insurance because we're not supposed to pay the ransom anyways. And cybersecurity insurance isn't covering really anything more than just the ransom. So it'll be interesting the next year or two to see where cybersecurity insurance goes, how districts are going to deal with not paying a ransom. In most cases, they don't. But where the cost, I think, and this is me personally, comes from, is the manpower it takes to get your system back up and running. And be able to recover your data. So I think less and less that I think most districts are, and I don't know if it's state by state, but of not paying ransom. So I'm really wondering where cybersecurity insurance is gonna play into it going down the road. So you know what, if your data is secure and it's not sitting on a flash drive on administrative assistant's desk or the superintendent's desk or whatever. I think most districts are doing a pretty good job. I think it's when you get into third party, when we're rostering our students, and they want age, they want ethnicity, they want to know, you know, parents' maiden name, they want to know so much. And so the more we can keep our data in house in secure locations, and not in one place, it's really good. But districts are getting really good at this. But I think a big software company got hit a couple weeks ago, and it is affecting districts all over the country. So it's in many cases it's that third party. It's not the software company we're working with, it's the company that software company is working with is where the problems are. So
I know, like with us, definitely, we've even had to have training for like different OEM manufacturers that we work with. Like if you have this sensitive data, it is only supposed to go to these type of people. You can't give it out to this like this level of people. Kind of how we were mentioning, there's like a hierarchy. So obviously, it's like, does this person really need to know this information? We really have to be very mindful for that, even just with us. And again, we're working with schools. We have some student information. We don't have a whole lot. We just get device information mainly. But even still, if they get that, they can tie that back to a student, and then it just goes from there, just spirals out of control. So I know even us, we have policies in place to try to help prevent that.
and that's why I'm working with some of these companies. I actually work with a Canadian company. They're a math program, and develop a data governance panel that the administrators could turn off and on what data can be shared within the software. But I've talked to companies, and they're like, "Well, why wouldn't we want to have this information? Why can't we have this information? Why don't you just send us all your data points?" And sometimes, until much like we were talking about the teachers, sometimes the software companies don't even realize, like, yeah, we don't really need that information, but it's just how it's always been. And if they can't justify that, districts want to know the software companies are working closely to protect the data that we're protecting. And the conversations I have with software companies are very interesting. Even salespeople, I'm like, so I read in your data privacy agreement that you're collecting this, and this piece of information. And he's like, yeah, okay. And I said, well, you can't collect that piece of information. And they have to go back to someone else, and they're like, yeah, we are collecting that information. They're like, well, then we're not dealing with you. So it's interesting. Even their salespeople aren't always educated as to what really they should be having their system. So
And that's an interesting point, because I've never, probably part of the 99% of people that click I acknowledge or I agree to the terms and conditions above without reading the 1,000-page disclaimer. I would assume someone in your position and as knowledgeable as you are about cybersecurity and data sharing, that's probably something you look over pretty decently, right? Or
no, absolutely, all the time. And I work, a lot of school districts are doing with the Student Data Privacy Alliance, and it's the Exhibit E. And it's a customizable agreement between the vendor and the school district as to how much data is going to be shared. There is a template for it, but and a lot of times we customize it, or we'll say, okay, this school district is using this Exhibit E, and we like their Exhibit E, so we're going to use it in our agreement. They're the Student Data Privacy Alliance, and A4L also, they have lists of districts who have not signed the data privacy agreement. And those are the companies we're not working with. So to your point, it's like I say to teachers, your job is not to read through all this legal jargon. Your job is to teach our kids. Yeah, that's your job. My job is to make sure that I understand these agreements. We run it by our council, our district council, and that I work with organizations like the Data Privacy Alliance to make sure that we're protecting our students. So it's a group effort, but what we don't want teachers to do is be fearful. We don't want them to do those click wrap agreements. So it's more about education, and let us do our job so you can do your job. So I always say to them when I do training, I say, just think of when Facebook just put out all that information about you. Think about what that does to our kids. When you're signing these things, you're basically saying the same thing. Like, all my students' data, you can have it. You can do whatever you want with it. And once you make it personal for them, they get it. They really get it. And they want to be hands off. They don't want to be in charge of all that. But it's definitely a collective group. COSIN does a great job with it as well. So
in the classroom itself, on your phone, you can download apps that have your attendance stuff on it. So you can just walk around the classroom, click attendance. You can do your grade book on your phone. You can do a lot of different apps that schools use where you can use it on the computer. But if you can also use a mobile version.
Mhm.
if you don't click I acknowledge or I accept the terms, you're not allowed to use the app. So there's actually a way to, or you guys can go to that company and amend those terms and conditions, or is that just kind of a here and there type of thing and it doesn't work for every app or, you know, company or
Right. So there's what went on during the pandemic, especially was the free teacher versions of things. So during the pandemic, every teacher got an email saying, you can use this during the pandemic. It's more of a culture change. Teachers can use a lot of apps that are free, especially, but there's no data administrative panel. There's no way to roster it. There's no way. So it's more about education and saying we'd love you to be able to use this app, but we're not going to allow you to add your students to it. But let us look into buying it at a district level or a school level or a classroom level. There are a lot of programs out there that actually can scan for us, Chrome, and tell us which apps our students are going to, which our apps our teachers are going to, and then we can have these conversations with the teachers and say, okay, so you've been wanting to use this particular program. Let's look into buying it because right now you're not getting any of the premium information. You can't roster it with your classes. You're really putting yourself and your children in danger. And let's work together in a collaborative way. So it's really a culture change. And unfortunately, which I struggle with, there are still software programs out there that will only sell individual licenses to teachers. They do not have district licenses. And those are the ones I struggle with because, and I'm not going to name them, but it's like, I don't really want to use your product because I have no control over it. The teacher has to buy her own license using a credit card. It's just not good practice. But for me, I think it's just been an education for everybody, and it has some pain points, but once it's in place, the teachers like it so much better because now they have a student who comes into the classroom, the students are automatically rostered to that app. Um, so to your question, yes, they can, but we highly discourage it for a lot of reasons.
so you did mention that you have been spending a lot of time writing.
Mhm.
I don't want to assume incorrectly and assume that you have been writing about cybersecurity and everything we've been talking about, but what kind of topics do you generally find yourself writing about and researching and getting that information out there for everyone else to read?
Um, Anything in the ed tech world, I talk about social emotional learning. I talk about the science of reading. I talk a lot about connectivity issues, digital equity issues, reaching marginalized students. So I really focus on showing the successes that are happening in school districts. I don't write about products per se, but I write about problems and solutions, and I really focus on what the districts are doing. So I do a lot of research, I do a lot of interviews, and I really want to highlight what's going on in the ed tech world and what educators and administrators are dealing with, and then highlighting districts that are doing it well. um, I wrote an article, long article for Education Next, which is a Harvard publication, and they were to talk about cybersecurity, but they also wanted to focus on what are districts doing right. We talk, and I'm going back to cybersecurity just because this is an example of we assume teachers and administrators and districts, are not addressing the digital equity. They're not addressing our marginalized students. They're not addressing data privacy, which they are. So I try and highlight those case studies where they are doing the work, um, because we don't see a lot of that. We see what's in the news. We don't see the good work that's going on in districts.
So your publications or writings and research isn't just centered towards administration and the technology directors at schools. You're also looking at what teachers can do in the classroom to help bridge the gap with technology.
Yeah, and I'm, right now, high dosage tutoring is huge. The online tutoring has become was big before the pandemic, and then it became really big during and now at pandemic. And so I talk a lot about curriculum instruction and how to reach the students who are struggling. And also, so it's more about, I think, because I have an education background, I talk about education. I don't like to talk about the tech as much as the application of the tech to improve student growth and learning and all that. So it's more about education than it is about the tech itself. But we need tech to do a lot of things we're trying to do right now. So
I come from the same kind of education mindset background. So when I talk to tech directors, it's the same kind of thing where here's how it can help your students if this is all working. And it's just it's one of those things you can't get out of your head when you're talking to someone about something, because it's engraved in you, right? So what is something then that you're seeing in the case studies, or just talking with administration and educators, that teachers are doing really well with technology in the classroom? And what's something that maybe they could be utilizing the technology for better, or they're kind of moving that way, and new things that are coming out, like, because it's always changing, right? So what's something that's going really well, and what's something that could use improvement or is just now coming into the scene?
okay. I think what's going really well is teachers are utilizing. Here's a good example. Uh, it was a younger grade, and we were talking about um, Chrome iPads in the classroom, and I says, "Well, you're probably not going to need as many iPads, on a daily basis because you're back in person." I don't know what I was thinking, but the teacher's like, "Oh no, we need them more than ever. I'll have this group of students working on this project together. I'll have a paraprofessional working with this student who's struggling over here. I'll be doing something on the interactive whiteboard, and this students are working independently, and we need the technology in the classroom." I'm thinking, all right, you don't need your sound bars, you don't need all this stuff, and they want it more and more because they've gotten so used to having that part of how they teach. And I think it's been really good for teachers, so they're not standing in front of the classroom anymore. They're actually allowing students to self-select how they want to learn and where they want to learn. So I think that's been really good. I think the assistive technologies that have come out, teachers are embracing them. So you may have all the students reading the same book, but they're reading it at a different level. Maybe they're using like Sora, where you have the dyslexic functions or the large print functions or the read aloud, while you have other kids actually reading the book. And same with your ESL students as well. I think teachers right now are burnt out. I think in what I'm also seeing is they want to get back to the way it was, just because they're done. I think technology is kind of taking let's take a minute, let's evaluate what we've been using, let's see what's going to work going forward, and just stop with the initiatives going for right now. And I'm hearing that from a lot of superintendents. They're like, we just need to take a breath. So I don't know if I would recommend adding new technology. I think we should continue working with what we have and honing in on it, and giving that student ownership of their learning. And I think this is what the pandemic, and I hate to say it, it's like, yay pandemic, but we really needed to make this jump. But I think it's also time to say, all right, we got 25 apps that do the same thing. Let's back up and take a look at what's really working for students. Yeah. And it's all about interoperability. We want everything to be seamless. We want it to work with our student information system or our learning management system. We want a product that does multiple things, that is not just a standoff product. We want products that we can, as administrators, have an administrative panel where we can get data, we can get reports, we can control how data is passed through, and the programs. And so yeah, I think we were all taking a step back and saying, okay, so now we have Chromebooks in everybody's hands, we got iPads in everybody's hands. This is great, we're moving forward, but let's just take a break and focus on what's really working. And so much of it's amazing.
As far as where where teachers and administrators can go to learn all of this information, either from you or just in this, side of the industry in general. I mean, what are some recommendations? Are there readings? Are there websites? Should they go into conferences? All the above?
um, I think conferences are a backup, and I honestly, it's been the best thing for me because that's where I connect with people. I just came back from ISTE, and it's just so cool to see people actually collaborating in the hallways and going to sessions and hearing from their peers. And they also, so it's been great to see the in person. I think the fact that a lot of them are doing hybrid, the virtual pieces are really good. Speaking of ISTE, ISTE's got a great community where it's broken down by different categories. And so if you have librarians, there's a librarian one, there's coaches, it's administrative one, and it's a great community where they can actually talk to each other and solve each problems and share things. COSIN has a great one for their tech directors, which has been really good. I become, I think Twitter has been a game changer, I think, in the educational space. It's where people are communicating and they're sharing and they're doing communication webinars. And so I think social media, especially Twitter right now, has been huge. I think I think LinkedIn has even changed. It's become more of a community than a place to put your resume, which has been really cool. But definitely any of the big organizations, like, Chantel, Indiana has a great CTO group there. Every state has an ISTE affiliate, and getting involved with that, and try to get out to the conferences, just even the small ones, just to be around people. That's where the energy is, and that's where I think we need it right now. So, but that would be my suggestions. But follow me on Twitter would be great too.
There's nothing wrong with a shameless plug.
Yeah, so that's actually where I was going to go. So we're kind of getting close to the end of our time here. So if there's anything you want to shout out, any of your writings, anything like that, where they can maybe read some more about you or just what you write about, if you want to shout that out, you're more than welcome.
Sure, yeah, definitely. I always post my articles on Twitter and Facebook, and I usually shout out to all the school districts that I write about. I have a website that's actually changing a little bit, but it's eileenbelastock.com. And all my writings are there as well. My email is ebelastock@gmail. Anybody can reach out to me, but I'm very accessible. But Twitter is probably Twitter and LinkedIn, the easiest way to find me. But yeah, I appreciate the time. This has been great. I love talking about tech, and about our students, and it was really, really nice to meet both of you.
And I didn't realize I might have put my school in jeopardy bringing my own computer in. So you learn something new every day.
And change your password, please. Change it.
Yep. All right.